course. Here's a 500-word story based on the topic, When Someone No Longer Loves You. These are the 4 earliest signs they're emotionally pulling away. When someone no longer loves you, these are the 4 earliest signs they're emotionally pulling away. Samantha had been with Mark for nearly 12 years. They had weathered careers, cross-country moves, and raising 2 kids together. But recently, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. It wasn't obvious at first. There were no loud arguments or dramatic declarations. Instead, it was in the quiet moments, the empty spaces where connection used to live. Samantha decided to trust her instincts and look closer. It was then she realized she was seeing the 4 earliest signs that Mark was emotionally pulling away. The first sign was silence where conversation once lived. Mark, who used to tell her about his day, his worries, and his dreams, had grown increasingly quiet. Dinners, once filled with laughter and shared plans, became brief exchanges about logistics and to-do lists. Samantha missed the random, silly conversations that had once tied them together like invisible threads. The second sign came in the form of emotional unavailability. Whenever Samantha tried to bring up how she was feeling, Mark would brush it off, change the subject, or retreat into distractions like work or his phone. She realized that he no longer asked her how she was truly doing, and when she opened up, his responses felt hollow and detached. The third clue was a lack of effort in shared experiences. Mark no longer suggested date nights or small weekend getaways like he used to. He seemed indifferent when Samantha proposed ideas, offering lukewarm responses or last-minute excuses. It felt as though being together was no longer something he actively wanted. It was just something he passively tolerated. Finally, the fourth and perhaps most painful sign was a drop in physical affection. Little things like holding hands, spontaneous hugs, or a simple kiss on the forehead had disappeared. Samantha could still remember how much those small touches used to comfort her, making her feel loved without a single word. Their absence now screamed louder than any fight could. Acknowledging these signs wasn't easy for Samantha. It hurt deeply to admit that love could fade so quietly, so invisibly. Yet facing it also gave her clarity. She realized that love, in its healthiest form, is a daily choice. A choice Mark was no longer making. After many heartfelt attempts to reconnect that went unanswered, Samantha made the brave decision to prioritize her own emotional well-being. She sought counseling, leaned on friends for support, and eventually chose to step away from a relationship that no longer nourished her soul. Through this painful journey, Samantha learned that recognizing the early signs of emotional withdrawal isn't about blaming yourself. It's about honoring your own need for love, respect, and genuine connection. Love shouldn't be begged for or chased. True love shows up every day, in small ways, without having to be asked. Would you also like a short 2-sentence version of this story that I can turn into a voiceover clip? I can help you choose a voice like Alloy, Nova, or Shimmer. Of course. Here's an additional 500-word paragraph continuing Samantha's story and going deeper into her healing process. In the weeks following her decision to step away, Samantha wrestled with a complex mix of emotions: sadness, relief, anger, and even guilt. She questioned herself constantly. Had she been too sensitive? Had she given up too soon? Yet every time she sat quietly with her feelings, the truth remained steady. Staying in a relationship where she felt invisible was not love. It was self-abandonment. Slowly, Samantha began to rebuild her life. She reconnected with friends she hadn't seen in years, throwing herself into coffee dates, art classes, and community events that reignited her spirit. For so long, her world had been centered around Mark's moods and availability. Now it expanded wider with every choice she made for herself. She began journaling every morning, writing not about what she had lost, but about what she hoped to find: peace, authenticity, joy. Therapy played a huge role in her healing too. Through counseling, Samantha uncovered deeper patterns. How, for years, she had accepted breadcrumbs of affection, convincing herself they were enough because she was afraid of being alone. Understanding this helped her shift her perspective from self-blame to self-compassion. It wasn't that she was unlovable. It was that she had finally stopped settling for a love that didn't meet her needs. She learned that emotional distance is often not about loud exits, but about quiet withdrawals. A lesson painful but essential. One of the most powerful steps Samantha took was setting new boundaries. She promised herself she would never again ignore her intuition for the sake of keeping peace. If someone pulled away emotionally in the future, she would address it early instead of burying her discomfort. She learned to have hard conversations, to ask brave questions like, "Are you still invested in us?" And to be prepared to hear the answer, even if it hurt. Her courage grew not from avoiding pain, but from facing it head on. As the seasons changed, so did Samantha. She smiled more, laughed louder, and stood taller. She found beauty in small, everyday moments: a crisp morning walk, a good book under a cozy blanket, a spontaneous road trip with her best friend. Love returned to her life, but not from an outside source. It blossomed within her, nurtured by the respect and kindness she finally offered herself. By the time a new relationship eventually came into her life, Samantha was different. She no longer clung out of fear. She loved openly but wisely, knowing that real connection would never require her to silence her own needs or accept less than she deserved. In the end, Samantha's story wasn't one of heartbreak, but of awakening. She learned that when someone stops loving you, it's not the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter where you learn to love yourself more fiercely than ever before. And that, she realized, was the most important love of all. Would you also like me to now create a 2-sentence version of this expanded story that I could turn into an AI voiceover clip for you? I can help you pick a voice too.